how can I communicate? How can I show up with the advisor relationship to someone that I've only been providing compliance service for many years? So they buy into this advisor mindset, they're a compliance provider. How do you make the transition? For this question, we'll start with Steve and go to Angie, and then the next one will go Angie, Steve, and back and forth. But Steve, in this instance, how do you approach this question? How can they begin to communicate? How can they show up to move into a type of advisor status?
The worst thing that accountants can do, and this I do sadly see quite a lot, is basically to hide behind the fact, well, we haven't done it before. We don't quite know how we're going to introduce this subject with our clients going forward, so we won't bother. And so that inertia just continues it, and that's a self-fulfilling and destructive prophecy. So you have to sort of break through that, and I think it involves actually some upfront candor with your clients and saying something like, we took a long, hard look at so when you're talking to a pre-existing, long-established client, look, Dave, and in my role plays, the other person, the client, is always called Dave. It just happens to be your name as well, David. But Dave, we took a long, hard look at what our clients really wanted from us as accountants, and what they were telling us was they wanted us to use our skills with numbers in more valuable and insightful ways, so that we could help them make better decisions and get better results as a consequence. And so we've refocused the energy, the efforts, the services within our firm to meet those kind of needs. Let me show you what I mean. Now, that's a great sort of opening script to sort of explain the transition, not to hide away from the fact that you haven't done this stuff in the past, to sort of acknowledge it in a nice, gentle way, but explain that you're moving the practice forward and you're responding to the needs of clients. And then what I would say is that, and I love that phrase, by the way, let me show you, because the sooner you then actually demonstrate something to them rather than merely talking about it, the much sooner you will break through their skepticism. Words are easy. If you say, well, we can help you with in an advisory and consulting kind of capacity, those are just cheap words. They're vibrations in the air. They really don't count for anything in most clients' minds. What you've got to do is root it in a reality that they understand, that they see, that they perceive, that they experience. And the best way of doing that is by actually giving them a taste of it. Let me show you what I mean. And then you move to some kind of easy, simple, but high impact initial piece of advice, which grabs consulting, advisory advice, that grabs their attention, and that sort of then begins to establish the starting point for the ongoing conversation. I'm sure we'll come back to what some of those deliverables, what some of those starting points might be. But in principle, I think that's a great way of tackling that question.
Yeah, and I want to follow up with examples of deliverables. I know that's a question that's coming up, so we'll dive into that in a second. But I want to ask Andrew the same question, which is, for somebody that is a compliance-based firm, how do they begin to either mindset shift, action shift? How can they start to feel like they can make that transition to being more advisor-focused for their client base? What are some things that they might need to think about or set up in their firm as they're making that transition?
Sure, David. Well, I definitely agree with what Steve talked about in terms of changing the conversation. And I think it really comes down to being more comfortable with questioning versus telling or knowing. So what I mean is, as practitioners, most people are trained to know the answer. So when you're working with clients on compliance type services, you're paid to be the expert and you're paid to know the answer. And so your meetings feel a lot different than they would if you were taking more of an advisory approach. So my advice would be change the conversation. And, Steve mentioned having a meeting with the client and saying, I'd like to explore, I'd like to, look at your business maybe in another way. Those weren't exactly your words, but I would just suggest having a different kind of meeting and invite the client out for coffee or tea or for lunch and ask questions about personal and professional goals. What's going on with your business? Tell me everything that's on your mind. Open up conversations like that so that you are being fed information around what the pain points or situation points are, so that you are then able to offer a suggestion, which might be a consultative or advisory kind of relationship. It might be that you're referring a center of influence into the relationship that has expertise in areas where you don't, but you're still providing an advisory kind of relationship to the client.